My name is Mike Arnold. I'm the editor of The Ranger. I'd like to thank you all for coming to our event this morning. It's a celebration of National Newspaper Week 1992, and it's sponsored by the Department of Mass Communications and the campus chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. This morning event is a source of pride for all of us in the journalism department. Not only is our college chapter receiving the first national recognition from the Society of Professional Journalists, but also the president of that society is here to present us the award and to speak with us about the First Amendment. But before the program begins, would you help me in welcoming our honored guests here to this morning? We have the interim chancellor of the Alamo Community College District, Dr. Doug Harlan. And the interim vice president of San Antonio College, Dr. Ken Shoemate. And the Vice President of Student Services, Dr. Earl Wright, is supposed to be here, but I don't see him anywhere. Before we get started this morning, we have an award to present for the winner of the essay contest. Is John Davis here? If he could come forward, please. His essay was entitled "What the First Amendment Means to Me," and for his winning entry, he wins 2 free passes to Fiesta, Texas. Thank you, John. And also we owe special thanks to Professor Peter Klein and the San Antonio College Brass Ensemble for the great music they were playing when we were coming in this morning. And also special thanks go out to Professor Chet Hunt and his public relations class. They did a lot of work in organizing and promoting this event. Our guest speaker this morning is Ms. Georgiana Vines. She is the National President of Society of Professional Journalists, and she is an assistant managing editor of the Knoxville, Tennessee News Sentinel. She has taught journalism at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and she has won national awards as a reporter at the Sentinel for covering city government. She has been a leader in the Society of Professional Journalists since 1983, when she was elected director of Region 3 in that organization. And she holds a Bachelor in Arts degree from Florida State University, which she earned in 1961. And she has done graduate work in journalism and in political science at the University of Tennessee. She'll be speaking this morning about the First Amendment under fire, threats to the public rights to know. And please join me in welcoming Ms. Georgiana Vines.
This is very exciting for me. I've been on the national board, as he said, for 8 years, and only officers of the board get to present charters. And I became an officer last November when I was elected president-elect, and due to some circumstances back in February, I became president, and here I am, and I'm really glad to be here. This has been wonderful so far. The music was just a real inspiration. It was a great idea, and the public relations class, Chet Hunt, who's the teacher there, really deserve another round of applause for all they've done in setting this up. I'm glad to see that the Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ, has support from the administration that it does, that is shown by the presence of the officials here. It means a lot to us. It will help SPJ survive. And this time would like to ask Tricia Buckhorn and Marianne Odom. Tricia is the president of the local chapter. Marianne is the faculty advisor to come up. Let me say a few words about my 15,000 member organization as they approach us. The Society of Professional Journalists was founded in 1909 as Sigma Delta Chi, and since then has grown steadily in prestige. Today is the acknowledged leader in the never-ending fight for freedom of information and for high professional ethics in the gathering and dissemination of that information. Through the years, the society has undergone much change, but it has never departed from the basic ideals upon which it was founded. This association is one which the members seek to perpetuate a profession based on freedom to learn and report the facts, that believes in public enlightenment as the forerunner of justice, that is as jealous of the right to utter unpopular opinions as the privilege to agree with the majority, that regards itself as the interpreter of today's events and the mirror of tomorrow's expectations, that ascribes motives only when motives go to the heart of the issue, and finally, that lays its own claim to service on a vigilance that knows no midnight and a courage that knows no retreat. Democracy needs both a sentinel and a champion, and the weapon of the first is broad sympathy, and of the second, a trenchant phrase. We urge you to assist in the realization of these purposes and these ideas as in the Society Professional Chapter and the San Antonio College Campus Chapter, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the chapter, on behalf of the chapter, I present you this yellow rose.
I want you to know yellow roses are my favorite.
Oh,
they really are. You guessed right.
Oh boy, oh boy. Thank you very much for coming here. Tennessee to present this to us. Very much honored with this. Hopefully we will live up to the standards of SPJ.
You will.
I have faith. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to mention one thing. SPJ is open to any person in the communications field. And hope that you would consider joining. You can get an application in room 200 of Flockton Student Center in our department. Thank you.
I appeared on a television program in Knoxville last week where we had a general discussion on the media bashing, and journalism ethics. One question I was asked was, what is the possibility of some kind of backlash or obstacle down the road that would make it difficult for the press to carry out its First Amendment responsibility? I told the interviewer we were already there. The press has plenty to worry about in fulfilling its role of shedding light so that people can find their own way. The problems are everywhere: campus censors, secret government, chilling libel laws, closed courtrooms, arrests of reporters, public anger, the public's concern for privacy, whether it's Arthur Ashe's or its own. There are all kinds of warnings we need to be listening to. A 1991 survey by Lewis Harris and Associates found 79% of U.S. citizens have a widespread concern about personal privacy, up from 64% concerned in 1978. More than 70% said consumers have lost all control over how personal information about them is circulated and used. The public believes the media is part of that threat. Ross Perot certainly does. He has accused reporters of gotcha journalism for their coverage of insider dealings that belie his outsider rhetoric. And he has even more disdain for women journalists who ask tough questions, saying they do negative stories because, quote, they're trying to prove their manhood. The Society of Professional Journalists, or SPJ, has just published its annual Freedom of Information report, which takes a look at what's happening at the federal, state, local, and even campus level around the country. And that is in the current issue of Quill for those who are members, those who are not members. I'm sure we can find ways to make it available through the Department of Journalism here. And if you're interested, I urge you to contact them. The purpose of the FOI report is to send up a red flare where major problems exist so that SPJ and other journalists can work to put it out. The report also tells where progress has been made, and I'm using a lot of information from that report for today's talk. SPJ found a major problem needing attention is the number of state legislatures trying to legislate away rights of the public to have access to information. Legislatures have enacted laws that close government records to protect privacy. What's happening is that commercial interests are using ever more efficient computers to strip people's most personal records bare. Credit bureaus, insurance companies, credit card companies, banks, phone companies, and countless retailers collect details of individual lives, and many of these businesses sell or use the information in ways that threaten privacy. In the Lewis Harris poll referred to earlier, more than 50% of those polled said federal freedom of information laws have gone too far in allowing access to government documents, and 64% said the press goes too far in investigating the private lives of politicians. Wisconsin is one example of a state where legislators are marching backwards. Earlier this year, the Wisconsin legislature voted to turn the state's open records law upside down. Instead of assuring access to records, it required record holders to first consider the privacy concerns of those named in the records. The provision was vetoed by the governor after the press there objected, but its sponsor says it will be back. That particular legislator has been quoted as saying people are becoming aware of the increasing danger to their freedom and privacy. Quote from the legislator, "I don't think the public has a right to all information that is maintained about individuals." While that privacy issue was vetoed, another provision was not. It mandates that names of applicants for state jobs remain confidential. Previously, all such names were open to inspection by the public. The legislature later compromised and changed the law to require disclosure of the names of 5 finalists. Applicants have the option of requesting confidentiality, which will be granted if they are not finalists. In addition, Wisconsin created a privacy advocate and privacy council within the state government, which will monitor legislation that could affect privacy. Actions like this are occurring elsewhere, even in my own state of Tennessee. The state attorney general in Tennessee this summer gave an opinion that vital records were not to be made public, and these records included things like marriage licenses and had the effect of including other records in county clerk's offices such as wills, business applications, and that kind of thing. And the whole thing came about because a marketing firm had gone into some counties and was trying to get information on people who had married. When we looked into this, we found out actually most county clerks had 2 sets of books. One that reporters were using that had just basic information about people applying for marriage licenses. And then there was another state record that went a little bit beyond just that, that told things like how many times people had been married and how was the last marriage, how did it end, whether it was by death or divorce or whatever. The press in our state, including SPJ, asked the Attorney General to reconsider his opinion, and he issued another one which was still confusing, and it's definitely an area where we're going to have to go to the legislature and get it clarified, because the vital records are something that we, and most newspapers, that's not true just in Tennessee, it's true all over the country, use this information just and put it in the paper and let people decide for themselves whatever they want to do with this information. It is public record and it should be available. Here are some other examples. Louisiana, the problems here come through the state university system. The legislature passed a bill allowing booster clubs connected to public universities to function as private organizations. The nonprofit fundraising groups can now keep their records closed. I think this probably occurs elsewhere, and I suspect it's an area that the press may look into some more. In Minnesota, the legislature narrowly defeated several bills that would have limited or closed public access to motor vehicle records. 2 years ago, a bill was passed that allowed people to give alternate addresses to the Department of Motor Vehicles under some circumstances. The battle for access to records was helped by stories like that appearing in the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, which showed a number of licensed airline pilots had alcohol-related driving violations. The cross-checking needed for this kind of story couldn't have occurred without access to the records. Another idea brewing at the state level is on the libel front. It's coming from a little-known group called the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. The group occupies itself with drafting model laws that are offered to the legislatures of all 50 states in hopes of bringing state-by-state consistency in statutes governing commercial law, adoptions, marital property, and the like. The group decided 3 years ago the law of defamation or libel was in need of reform and uniformity, and set out to draft a Uniform Defamation Act to solve the problem. Media groups and some commissioners themselves are protesting the act, but a drafting committee has produced what is considered a multi-headed horror that would indeed bring consistency to libel law, but at the expenses of the First Amendment. If submitted to the states, it would encourage legislatures to open up the whole field of libel law to tinkering, where now generally protective courts hold sway. the proposed legislation would drastically change the way libel actions are handled by the courts. And among the key features, aggrieved readers who believe they've been libeled but don't seek money damages could bring a simple vindication lawsuit against the media that would decide only whether the disputed publication was true or false. The media defendant could shortcut such a suit by agreeing it was wrong and printing a retraction. The media defendant would not be able to defend itself through use of the various privileges and constitutional protections that the courts have provided the media. No longer would the plaintiff have to prove that the media error was made in reckless disregard of the truth. The only issues at trial would be falsity and damage to reputation. Critics of this legislation believe the effect on the media would be to discourage tough reporting or push publishers and broadcasters toward retraction, even when it is unwarranted. The conference is to have public hearings this fall, which will be monitored closely by the media, where the media will voice opposition, and this is an area where the press should not be shy about speaking out against the proposal. I believe these FOI problems exist at the state level because some examination is going on there by the media and state officials don't like it. At the same time, I also believe that the examination is not usually as in-depth or as broad-based as it is at the local and national level, so a comfort level has developed with state officials that needs to be changed. Many state officials are vulnerable and they know it. The press needs to be diligent in investigating state agencies and lawmakers to make sure that the public's right to know isn't being infringed on. SPJ has a program called Project Sunshine, which is part of the solution at the state level. This is a program for helping to stem the tide of restricting the public's right to know by determining on a state-by-state basis how well government is accessible through open meetings and open records laws. It's my understanding that the Coalition Texas Media in the state does that kind of thing too, and we have SPJ members and SPJ chapters that are a part of that organization, and nationally we can help with any efforts that they have if called upon. We're in a position to help with model laws and guidelines. We want to have workshops with journalists at the state and local level to discuss these issues. And one of the things we're going to do is issue sunshine cards, which are wallet-sized cards for journalists which have a quick reference to local FOI laws and the First Amendment. So if they're confronted with a situation where a public official wants to close a meeting or isn't going to make a record available or this kind of thing, they can pull this card out of their wallet and say, okay, now, but you should, I'm entitled to this because of this and this and this. And that's the way we envision that working. Campus crime reports is another area that is unsettling. Administrators at many higher education institutions, including the University of Tennessee in Knoxville until recently, have done everything possible to keep secret information on crime on campus, particularly rapes of women. I think they fear the withdrawal of students or even fewer student applications and consequently a loss of state funds based on enrollment. College officials hid behind the Buckley Amendment protecting privacy rights for students. Federal and state judges began ruling against the institutions, which prompted the U.S. Department of Education to threaten to withhold federal funds if colleges cooperated in providing information on campus crime. Eventually, the department was told by a judge it should not do this, and Education Secretary Lamar Alexander reluctantly sought an amendment to the Buckley Amendment, which allows statistical information on crime to be released without the threat of violating the Buckley Amendment. There's still concern about how this new amendment will be interpreted because it gets into the whole issue of who the security force is or the investigative agency on campuses, and so there's going to need to be a clarification on that, and it's another area that we're watching. I would like you to know that Lamar Alexander did nothing while president of the University of Tennessee to enable the press to find out about campus crime in the statewide university system or on the Knoxville campus. He was there during a dispute over the alleged rape of a female student by 3 UT football players, and all he ever said or committed to was he would look into it. I would like to add that information on campus crime definitely is not restricted to what's happening to women. We had an instance in Knoxville where the parents of a male student murdered on the lawn of a fraternity house had to hire an attorney after 3 months to get the official university investigation into the young man's death. The last area I'd like to touch on today is the presidential election as a barometer in the freedom of information issue. Will the winner open government up or close it? Ross Perot has been a public figure, but not a public official with a history, or at least not one that I've become aware of yet. Been trying to keep up with him from Tennessee. Based on what has come out about the way he investigates people and bristles at criticism, he seems like a person who would want as much secrecy in government as possible. Bill Clinton and George Bush have records, however, and FOI has come up during their campaigns in exchange over which candidate raised taxes the most times during their public service administrations. The Bush administration raised questions about Clinton's tax strategy, saying the Arkansas governor closed off records of corporations to the press. Bush's campaign officials have said Clinton had 128 tax increases during his 12 years in office. Clinton's campaign's officials, however, say the total is lower, that Republicans are ignoring 48 tax cut Clinton also approved, and that by the GOP counting method, Bush raised taxes 73 times alone in 1990 by signing the tax bill that broke his well-known read my lips pledge. Bush generally has been a president who's fostered secrecy. The Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press at the beginning of the summer listed 340 separate actions by the Bush administration aimed at restricting access to government information, much of it under FOI denials, requests under the federal FOI law. Some examples of the administration's restrictive actions. Last February, congressional investigators studying a NASA space reactor program found a 2-page NASA instruction memo on how to avoid releasing FOI information, including such tips as using detachable stick-on paper and camouflaged handwriting to conceal important facts. When Richard Thornburg was Attorney General, he cut the Justice Department information staff from 12 to 4 persons and put a gag order on federal prosecutors across the nation. This had the effect of channeling all regional requests for information or case comment back to Washington. Some of this has changed under William Barr, but reporters still complain of a growing tendency towards sealing court papers. Clinton, as governor of Arkansas, at times has publicly sided with journalists in successfully opposing assaults on that state's FOI law. An attempt was made 5 years ago to exempt some board sessions of public agencies from the open meetings provision while allowing private attorneys to attend. The open meetings provision of the Arkansas FOI Act has been upheld many times by state courts and is considered particularly strong. The action opens all public records to inspection and copying by any citizen, with certain exemptions. These exemptions include records maintained by the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission related to site location. The way Clinton has dealt with this exemption shows an instance where he did not side with the press. A Japanese rubber firm decided in 1989 to locate near Conway in a mostly white section of the state. Because the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission had courted the firm, the commission was charged by civil rights leaders with consciously steering the Japanese away from the state's poor, black, and mostly jobless Delta region along the Mississippi River. The Arkansas Gazette attempted under FOI to obtain state records which might shed light on the accusation. With Clinton's full backing, a competitive advantage exemption was legislatively added to the state FOI law. The exemption reasons that such disclosures would give unfair advantage to competing businesses. In Arkansas, journalists can only get their hands on industrial recruiting data in the state if the courted business entity approves it or the material involves a direct grant or expenditure from the Industrial Development Commission. Thus, the Gazette was unable to answer the civil rights leader's charge. Clinton's campaign officials insist the governor was trying to be prudent in balancing the needs between jobs and complete openness. So it doesn't look like there will be complete openness in government, regardless of who is elected president. As far as protecting the First Amendment goes, openness will be a matter of degree. In conclusion, let me point out that the threat to freedom of information issues is not to journalists, but to the public. The First Amendment guarantees Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of the press for the people. Journalists often are skirmishing to obtain information so that the public will know what is happening in their government and institutions, but the battles that journalists fight are for helping the American people be well informed so they can make decisions regarding their lives and local, state, and national communities. The Society of Professional Journalists wants to be part of the solution to the problem through programs like Project Sunshine and an opportunity to talk about it here. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to be here during National Newspaper Week and to charter SPJ's newest and first community college chapter to help carry the torch for perpetuating a free press as the cornerstone of our nation and our liberty. Any questions? I'll be glad to take any questions if anybody has any, and I understand they'd like for you to come down here and ask them. She was in a class I spoke at yesterday. I figured she'd be here. I hope you're easier on me today.
Regarding ethics, there's a belief in the populace that the media influences as much as it reports what happens. For instance, Rodney King, why have pictures of those who say broadcast over and over that made him inflamed with the riots. After the verdict was brought in, we were went on the air, and they were called Blackbird Army immediately. We respond to that we are influencing rather than just reporting.
Well, I think both is happening, and the influence becomes a matter of judgment or a very personal decision about it. You're telling what's happening. The television people are very much aware that not everybody is sitting there watching their news 24 hours a day. For those who can catch it when they can, it's there, and if somebody's seen it once and want to see it again, they can always turn it off. On the other hand, part of the role of the press is to influence, and I'm saying that in what I would like to think is a responsible sense. Newspapers traditionally have tried to influence elections, people that they think represent good government and that kind of thing, and that's another form of influence that you also need. And you got to take the good with the bad. I do not think they accentuate the negative, but I think the negative is part of the news, and you can't ignore it. And people don't like the bad news being brought to them. If people had their choice, they would read only good news every day and only watch only good news. That's not all that's happening. I don't know whether it's... I'm going to take off my... No, I can't. Hello.
I'm with the Public Relations class here at San College.
Well, y'all doing a great job.
My question is regarding the electronic town meeting as a phenomenon that's pretty new to this election year. Ross Perot's used it, Bill Clinton's used it. I'd like to hear your insight into it, and I'd like to know what you think, if you think, that it is usurping the principal role of journalists in an election year. And if it is, what can journalists, we as all journalists, do to
I think one thing that's very clear is that journalism is changing in all respects. The electronic journalism is, this is a new form. The print media has to decide what its roles will continue to be. And what is happening is we have people who have not been recognized as trained journalists who are conducting a lot of these programs where the candidates are being interviewed and eliciting their comment. And I think that those of us within the industry need to deal with that somehow. And one of the ways that I see us doing it, and I don't know whether people will take advantage, is try to make sure that trained professional journalists get into the position where these things are happening. And whether that will happen or not, I can't say. And what they're saying is also being reported, and then if there hasn't been enough follow-up questions to what's being said, the press is coming back and saying, oh, he said this, but he didn't say that. And that is a very appropriate thing that we must continue to do. Does that answer your question? He asked me some yesterday, too.
Ms. Vines, I had a question. Since you pointed out the current trend for a lot of organizations is to secrecy, speculating in the future, do you think that, say, 100 years from now, perhaps the First Amendment might read freedom of speech only on a need-to-know basis?
I don't think so. One of the, I didn't talk very much about the courts today. There's still, and there was a reason for that, is that the court has changed a lot, and there's still a lot of uncertainty, and I'm talking about the U.S. Supreme Court, obviously. In our FOI report this year, the person who did kind of a wrap-up on that had been part of a delegation that went to see Justice Brennan last December. And the reporter who did this story isn't quite sure whether Brennan was really being optimistic about things, but even with the changes that were taking place, he felt that the First Amendment, as it is, was going to stay intact for a long time. And so I have to kind of rely on that kind of thinking. We're going to have to see, but because we've got some strong purists, constitutional purists, who've been appointed, that is to the advantage of First Amendment supporters.
What can the press do to change this? The situation as it is now is pretty scary.
Well, what you do, you lay it out, and then the influence comes with elected officials and the appointments they make, and just keep reporting what it is, and try to. Here's the place where if you're going to have influence, you try to influence the outcome.
Good morning, Ms. I was wondering if you think that television in the courtrooms follow the FOI.
I'm sorry, start that again.
Television in the courtrooms, do they follow the FOI?
Oh yes, that does, and there have been some very successful experiments with it.
Several states still do not allow them there.
And the federal courts don't either. They're being done on an experimental basis, and for the most part, there have not been any serious problems that have come. And so it's going to be a matter of whether judges are going to continue to let them in their own courts, or how widespread it may become.
Is your organization fighting that?
Yes, we would like it. Yes, and as I understand it, the American Bar Association does have a committee that's looking into this, and we have representatives who are. The Society of Professional Journalists has a First Amendment counsel in Washington who he's on a retainer basis with us, and part of his job is to monitor that kind of thing and encourage it when they're in an opportunity to do it. Yes, we're encouraging it very much.
Thank you.
Can we wind it up? Do you want to wind it up? Are there any other questions?
Just one question, Ms. Vines. What exactly is the FOI?
Freedom of information is what it stands for. I'm sorry. And we're talking about there the freedom to get the information you need either through open meetings or open records. And I've used it today a lot interchangeably. The First Amendment sets the stage, and then what is followed is very specific legislation at both the federal level and the state level that's called Freedom of Information laws or legislation, and it's sort of become an inward among journalists, and I apologize to you for not making that clear.
Ms. Mines, this is more a question on ethics than it is on First Amendment. The ethics includes broadcast media as well as the print journalists, and yet do you see a different set of ethics as broadcast journalists are following and print journalists? And if so, is SPJ working to make the code of ethics the same for both?
Okay, the Society of Professional Journalists does have a code of ethics that we encourage our members to subscribe to. And the kind of ethics that a journalist has, whether they're print or broadcast, then becomes either an individual thing for that individual or for their employer, whether it's a newspaper or whether it's a broadcast station. I don't think there's a difference in the code of ethics. I think the difference comes in the way people interpret it, or what a communications medium allows their employees to do or not do, or what the journalist decides to do or not do. Yes, what we can do is we're not in any kind of position to go in and say, well, now you shouldn't have done that, because we had a debate, we've debated this in our national conventions for several years, and we have what I call the pure journalists, and I don't say that in any kind of negative way, who think there's only one way to do it, and if you don't do it this way, then you criticize people, you censure people, you make an issue about it. The other side of it says, well, you can come in and you say, there are these compelling reasons why this happened this way, and then we may have a difference about the judgment that was used in that, but we're never going to find unanimity among all journalists about the way something is handled. And as a result of that, what we have decided to do as an organization is, yes, confront the issues, confront individuals, have meetings in communities where we have SPJ chapters, thrash it out, let people decide for themselves what they should do. If a newspaper or a broadcast station doesn't have a code of ethics, we'll offer ours as something to take a look at. It spells out what is fair play, that you don't run for public office, that you have a responsibility to uphold, and all of these things, and people can decide whether they want to be part of that or not. But we can't go in and dictate and say that's the way it's going to be. Okay, I believe that'll do it. Thank you.
Now, in recognition of National Newspaper Week, City Councilwoman Linda Billa-Burke, former student at this college, will present something from the San Antonio City Council.
It's a real pleasure to be here. It's kind of like being back home, and I hate to be a dead giveaway of my age if I told you how long I worked for this district and went to school here. It was tough sitting there in the lines listening to, because I've been on both sides.
We can debate.
It'd be fun to come back, and if Chet, I'm very open to coming and talking to classes about the other side of being an elected official and how much the media. I've had my little risks with the media, but let me tell you, we cannot do without the media. I think it's extremely important, and I look at the newspapers in this town as an educational tool and giving us ways to find out how to solve some of our problems. I've had an argument with one of our local newspapers on when the district attorney's office came up with some solutions and they didn't want to print them. I said, well, isn't it your job to inform the public? So if you're a journalist, whether it be print or electronic media, and you didn't talk very much about radio, not very many students ask, and I was real fortunate I did go through the RTF, took some classes here. You have a tough job. It's almost tougher than us as a politician, because you have to make that decision. Am I really giving accurate information? Is that person giving me accurate information? Where do you find it? So it's pretty tough. The public really deserves the right to know something about us, but yet at the same time, we like to have a little bit of privacy in our lives. Unfortunately, I'm on one of those elected spots that you are in the fishbowl. And you've got to be willing to open up your life to the community. When you start to run for public office, always keep that in mind. that you're going to be an open book. I try to protect my husband as much as I can because he doesn't like politics and he's very private. But I don't think I have anything to hide. I think it's the public's right to know how I do things and what I do. And I'm happy to say that the present council that we have right now is trying very hard to be very, very open, because previous councils have really done some deals that we're not proud of. So we're striving to help the media get the information out. And I think one really good thing for media people, I like to do this with our newspapers, is to sit down with them and set out the ground rules so we're not pointing fingers at each other. And that helps a lot because then we're a lot more open. So I'd like to make that suggestion. And I wasn't brought here to give a speech, but it's hard not to talk because I'm real interested and I'm a very big supporter of the press and what it does. I myself am a news junkie, and I love to read newspapers. It's my favorite thing to do when I travel. And I pick up lots of them. So you're at the best school for this also. I can tell you get very personalized attention from your instructors that you have at San Antonio College. I think it's one of the most outstanding junior colleges in the United States, and I'm not just saying that because I've been here, because I've seen the kind of students we produce, Class A students that come out of this junior college, and you're prepared by the time you get to a four-year institution. So welcome to SAC, and continue to stay here and be proud of being here. And I better do what I was asked to do here. I'm presenting today a proclamation, and I've got the whereases down, it's the rest of the stuff. Proclamation, whereas National Newspaper Week will be celebrated in our city from October 5th through the 9th, 1992, and whereas this week was established in 1939 by John Long, a member of the Newspaper Association Managers, to call attention to the important role of the press to the nation, and whereas members of the San Antonio College chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists recognize the newspaper as a reliable source of information and a forum for striving to preserve democracy, and whereas the chapter will observe the week with a week-long celebration, including a chapter presentation to the San Antonio College Chapter of Society of Professional Journalists by the National President of the Society, making it the only two-year college with an officially recognized SPJ chapter in the nation. Now, therefore, I, Nelson Wolf, Mayor of the City of San Antonio, in recognition thereof, do hereby proclaim October 5th through the 9th, 1992, to be National Newspaper Week in San Antonio, Texas. In witness whereof, I have unto set my hand, caused the seal of the City of San Antonio to be affixed to the 6th day of October, 1992, Mayor Nelson Wolf.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Student Chapter Society of Professional Journalists, I'd like to thank you all for coming today and encourage you to vote on November 3rd. Thanks.